This is Comic Shenanigans, episode 1107, Book of the Month Club, JLA 1-4.
Ain't no stopping them shenanigans. Love getting into shenanigans. All up in them shenanigans. 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 Shenanigans.
Welcome to the Comic Shenanigans podcast. This is Adam Chapman, your host. This is episode 1107. It's a Book of the Month Club on JLA 1-4 from 1996 to 97. I'm joined, as always, by my Book of the Month co-host, Nathan Struck. Nathan, say hello to the fine people.
Hi, everybody.
So this is kind of unexpected because I had been saying in the lead up to this episode for the last month, we're getting back to clones. Alas, scheduling fouled us again, so we were unable to convene the usual panel of Spider Bros, you, me, and Paul. So instead we looked at what other options could we talk about. We've predominantly focused on Marvel, mainly because you have Marvel Unlimited, I have Marvel Unlimited. It's very easy to do that. But you do have some DC titles, and some that you've recently acquired in the last couple of years. So you were like, okay, well, I recently acquired Wonder Woman by Greg Rucka, Hawkman by Jeff Johns, and JLA by Grant Morrison. What about one of those? And I'm like, yeah, that's pretty cool. And I was thinking Hawkman, but then I was like, you know what, that might be too deep for Nate right now.
Really?
Yeah.
Because of the whole Thanagarian mixed origin thing?
No, well, not so much. And I don't think it goes as hard in that. And I think it does. I think more. I started flipping through it. I'm like, I don't know if this is the right call right now. It's a little. I don't know. There's just something about it. So I thought, you know what, JLA is a seminal book. It's looked at by many as like one of the best things of that era. So I thought, you know what, let's talk about JLA. So before we really get into it and talk about when it came out, what was big at the time, and what circumstances birthed this book, I'm curious, prior to the homework for today, how much of this 4-issue arc had you read?
None.
Okay, but you knew about it,
tell you this,
right?
I'll tell you this right now, Adam. 0% Hawkman in this, so I give this 0 Hawkmans out of 10. I have another rating system if you'd like, but about how many watchtowers I give it. But yeah, disappointed in the lack of Hawkman, but maybe next time. No, I feel like I have familiarity with the story for some reason, but I've never read it. Was this adapted into the JLU cartoon in any way?
No, I don't believe so. I mean, the idea of bringing the kind of the big 7 was definitely how they formatted the TV show, although they subbed out Aquaman and put in Hawkgirl. But other than that, like, this is essentially what you see in the cartoon. Different Green Lantern, obviously. Different Barry. Wally. No, I guess they use Wally in the cartoon, too.
Great cartoon. Way more Hawk content in the cartoon, therefore better.
But I don't believe they've actually adapted this particular story. It's interesting. I actually thought about doing the Rock of Ages, because that's to many is that kind of the big story of this era, but it was in the next collection that you don't have yet, because I think the collection you had only went up to issue 9, so it made sense to kind of zero in instead on these issues. Now the Justice League at this point in time, you had the JLI period started in the mid to late 80s after Crisis and Legends, and that kind of ran through up until this period. Now there is technically the Midsummer Night, which I think is in your trade by Mark Waid, that happens first. It's actually, I couldn't find it easily digitally to read, and I don't actually own that. So I ended up not reading that or assigning that for reading instead of jumping right into JLA. What's interesting about this is, again, up until this point, we had different comics in the past that were Justice League of America, JLI, or Justice League International. This was just JLA, just the initials. And I did feel like that really symbolized something new that they were doing. And again, getting the cast back together, like making it the big guys. It's interesting. It's kind of similar to what you saw with Bendis in the New Avengers. He was like, why don't we just have the most popular characters be the Avengers? Why does it have to be Dr. Druid? Like, why can't we just make it the big guys that actually going to sell a book?
Great choice, by the way.
You're welcome. And it's interesting because in this book, like, you see some of the remnants of the Justice League that had existed prior to this team, and like it's Metamorpho and like a few other characters, and they're not really anyone's favorite characters. I mean, there might be someone's, but it's not. So right up at this point, like in the early to mid 90s, you had I'm trying to think about it. Justice League Task Force, Justice League Europe, Extreme Justice. Like there was all these other things that kind of diluted the brand, and they were like, no, let's just make a JLA book with the biggest and best characters. Although it's interesting, right after this opening arc, they kind of throw, like, a lot of it changes. Like suddenly Superman's electric blue, like all this stuff happens between the issues. But this first arc is very much like a definitive kind of statement that Grant makes about like these are the most powerful heroes in the DC universe. This is going to be their team. So you knew about this. Obviously, you know a lot of Morrison's work. How much did you know about Howard Porter, the artist?
Not much. I mean, he reminds me of, which artist am I thinking of? I'll remember his name in a minute. But no, I don't think I'd read very much of it. Very dynamic. Really enjoyed it. There's a few choices that just seem very curious in terms of like angles or like posing. One of my favorites, actually, even though it's quite silly, is of a Kyle Rayner who is realizing that the space station is under attack and things are shutting down, and he's in this excellent crouching position, but he's only crouching in his discovery that the backup systems are out of control, and then yelling with all his might. So, like, sometimes it's absolutely ridiculous, but I really liked it. It was fun, very, very kinetic in terms of his pencils, for sure.
Mm-hmm. I don't know what I read first. I probably read his Flash first, which actually came a few years later. Loved his work on the Flash. Some of my favorite work that him and Jeff Johns ever did. So I really like his work here. It's a little less refined than he gets later on in the Flash. I think he figures out how to do certain things. Porter's a really interesting artist. I've always been a fan of his work. He did have to stop drawing comics in the mid-2000s because he had severely injured his hand. He'd severed a nerve and almost the entire tendon in his thumb. So he took work as a bus driver, and then he retrained himself how to draw with his other hand. And now he still draws again, but he can't draw with his original dominant hand, but he taught himself how to redraw everything.
It's like the drummer of Def Leppard, right? Who had a car accident, I think, and that caused him to lose his arm, and he retrained himself to... the penciler I was thinking about, who he reminded me at times, is Bart Sears. That's who. There are times when that had very exaggerated anatomy, right? But I actually like Howard Porter better. So I really enjoyed this. The pencils are really fun, especially like, I know we're not really getting into the proper, I suppose, but like when Metamorpho grabs the other Justice League members and then takes them down to Earth. I mean, all the chemical combinations, all the elemental combinations he's doing to create his like life support system, and then crash lands on Earth in this like horrific, almost like The Thing style body horror of curled up around them to protect them. I'll keep. Batman, fantastic. It's menacing and dark and creepy, and Porter draws his hands in like claws, almost like talons at one point when he's introduced into the storyline. So really making him look otherworldly, animalistic, and kind of like a dark specter. So many choices in here I really like to make the characters distinct from each other. And I like the exaggerated features on most of these characters here. It works for me.
It's interesting. For many, this story is kind of the genesis of the kind of Bat God, interpretation of Batman that would persist for quite a while. The idea that, if prepped properly, he could take down anyone. And that they've definitely kind of built that up here. And I think if you're going to do Batman like that, it makes sense to do it when he's in the JLA book versus anything else, because he is amongst, superhumans and gods. How does this guy somehow function alongside them? And I guess that's kind of a referendum on Batman in this book, is like, why is he here? And he's not even given a lot of credit by the HyperClan, but he is the most dangerous one. And so I kind of like that Grant really focuses on that for Batman. And again, Batman, like a lot of these characters, you don't get too much characterization because it is kind of surface level, but it's more about them as gods. And so even Batman, the non-god, still acts godlike. In terms of how he interacts with things. His takedown of the White Martians and the fact that they're like, I know who you are kind of thing, and him being creepy and trying to scare even these Martians, very much like I think resonated with a lot of people that like that's Batman. He's pretty creepy. He's not scared of anything. He'll take it down.
His back matches.
Yep.
Yeah. He tries to rehabilitate, I guess, the opinions of many of the readers, or Grant tries to rehabilitate these characters. So Batman gets it, right? Like, why is Batman on the team? I think I recall an interview with Grant where they were talking about like that exact premise. But then you also the same thing from Aquaman, right? Like, the Martians will say the same thing. What is the deal with you? Like, you can't fly, and like, you got sturdy skin, but whatever. And he's like, I can actually attack the amphibious portions of your brain, the primitive portions of your brain, and I can give you, like, I don't know, an aneurysm or something. And then there's sometimes with the Kyle, like, Green Lanterns are known all over the universe as being worthy foes, but like Kyle gets time to kind of go like, why do I, as a young kind of kid who hasn't really earned my wings per se, get a chance to be on the team? Wonder Woman, Superman, never questioned, right? There's no question. In fact, even Martian Manhunter, I feel like Grant only does this to really kind of lead the reader to come to their own conclusions, or at least to support the claim to power levels that the Martians have when they list out why, what does he bring to the team. And Martian Manhunter has all these abilities, and also he knows power group dynamics really well, and so he's like a great facilitator or coordinator for the team. So like later on, oh, that's right, we've been reminded several times what the powers are of these Martians. If you have figured it on your own, good job, dear reader. If not, the more godly characters really just don't. The only time really you get, I found that they spent with powers, Morrison spends with powers, is the Flash. Where they had that great fight with. Are we pronouncing this Zoom? Like it's Zum or Zoom? Like umlauts over the U. My understanding is umlauts just make it sound like a regular U sound, but whatever. Which is cool. Doing some science stuff and super fast, light speed punch. I appreciate that as someone who thinks the Flash is rather lame. I like to get a little bit of I don't care about the treadmill and like the Speed Force mythos. But like, why is he a threat? And then I love the use of relativity and approaching the speed of light, and my mass becomes near infinite. So when I hit with like, almost infinite power. That makes me go, oh, he absolutely, like, he's not maybe redundant then with Superman, because with the speed that Superman has plus the power and everything like that, it makes me feel like he's redundant. Also, I'll stop in a second. Just kind of thinking of all their powers that Morrison puts in here. An interesting lead, which of course, how do you meet someone who has the power and knowledge of gasoline plus matches? But Superman has the heat vision, and he's like, I promise you I won't use this. Like, this is the ace in the hole. This is like, I can just wipe everybody out. But he's like, I'm going to just fight fair or something and then defeat you anyway with, like, the power of, like, bringing you into the Earth and the Earth's core stuff. I don't know. That felt a little bit, like, overly restrained. But besides that, I think Morrison does a good job showing everyone everyone's powers are, and then explaining why they work off each other, why they're all useful in this book. So that was noteworthy and a really good, I think, a great idea for an introductory story. And 4 issues is great. Mm-hmm. I'm glad it wasn't 6. I'm glad it wasn't 2. I think it was paced really well. I think it was just a really good little story, ultimately about how pale Martians are like genetic supremacists. They're fascists who believe in superiority of their gene pool, eugenicists, and how human beings should be allowed to, in their imperfection, find their own nobility and become people of tomorrow. And it's just the job of the Justice League to guide them, not to create lush landscapes out of deserts, which is a storyline that, like, Hickman does over and over again, right, with AVX, and he does again in Krakoa. Yeah. And where are my notes? And then, okay, hold on, give me 1 second. So, like, I have, like, notes here about all the DNA, right? There's clearly Squadron Supreme, right? Grenwald's Squadron Supreme's in here. Mm-hmm. And then the Authority comes after this? Is the Authority launch preceding this or after?
I'm not sure. I'd have to look that up.
Okay, so I feel like even if Miller and Ellis, then Miller, take from this or precede this is something in the air, right? That, obviously Squadron Supreme does before this and everything.
They're afterwards.
And there's a lot of...
The Authority is afterwards.
Yeah? Okay, so they are picking up off of this, right? That whole idea of, like, a realistic super team that is also hyper-violent and even this kind of art aesthetic. Like, I know Brian Hitch comes in later to draw, but there's enough feeling of like, oh, like this feels like a universe where Brian Hitch's art style works really well. And so it's just interesting how there's like, it feels like there's connective tissue to Authority. And then there's all this like meta commentaries that Morrison's known for doing, which Alan Moore is really a big fan of, the big critique of the superhero. And how Alan Moore has said, look, like early on, Golden Age superheroes were champions of the every person, and they were like, you know, busting managers or bosses or owners in factories for not paying fair wages. When did they become, you know, shills for the corporate interests, right? And this is like, you know, the Dark Knight Returns, right? This is also Frank Miller going, yeah, Superman's just become an oppressive tool of an oppressive system. And so this is the whole idea of like them critiquing the reactive versus proactive. They say at one point in the comic, and protecting a status quo, typically like a corporate status quo, and that superheroes are only really there to punch each other out and then fix like what I call God problems, like only issues like transdimensional tears and an opposing super team who wants to take over like your spotlight. Like nothing that the average person really cares about or can benefit them. Yeah. They're like, we're going to clothe your homeless or home the homeless and feed the starving, stuff that like you never see superheroes do anymore. So I thought there was like a number of like threads all crisscrossing from different storylines and different critiques of superheroes to ultimately end in like this kind of like hopeful, don't worry, the Justice League are good, but never really actually like solving the problem to begin with. Like they don't go to a soup kitchen at the end, and Batman doesn't say, I'm going to spend my billions of dollars to actually invest in mental health, you know, outreaches for people of Arkham or Gotham. Instead, I'm going to go back to beating up the mentally ill with my fists. So love Morrison, love the big ideas, love the big swing. I enjoyed the story, but it is interesting how it kind of doesn't really stick the landing in that way in terms of like the big picture themes for me. Because it still ends with them.
It still ends with them very much apart and standing on like the moon. Like
yeah, and they have their own watchtower. Like the bad guys, the Martians had their 3 watchtowers.
Yeah,
like, those are bad watchtowers, and they are mind controlling you. But our watchtower on the moon, is just like they are apart, and they are doing this. You know, and later on, right? Who watches the Watchmen? Doesn't Batman betray them in a storyline where he
that Tower
comes
of
up
Babel?
With his own protocols?
Yeah, basically.
Was that Tower of Babel?
Tower of Babel that's what 3 years later. But yeah, it's interesting, as you say. Like, there's so much work that the HyperClan does to one, save the world, or at least on the face of it, look like they're saving the world, to make themselves look like they're more effective do-gooders than, as you said, people just solving God problems. And then 2, they do a lot of work to try and then discredit the Justice League. And then the Justice League is able to defeat them, but there's not a lot of work done to like, show repairing the trust. Just that, like, it's Superman. But I'm like, yeah, but you just were saying Superman was like the lone voice against... And it actually felt like a meditation on some of the elements of Kingdom Come as well. The idea that, like, Superman is not for executions. Superman, whereas the HyperClan is, and so they do execute someone, and then everyone else kind of goes underground as a result because they're afraid of dying, whereas Superman would never do that. So it's interesting, that's kind of baked into the DNA. It came out, I guess, around the same time. I think Kingdom Come was 95, so this was a year and a bit later. So that, again, would have been in the ether as well, about, you know, what Superman can stand for, and him maybe being more old-fashioned in his own way. I'm not even sure how Grant feels about that based on his text. Like, does he believe in Superman being the way, like, he's done All-Star Superman, so obviously he gets Superman. But it's interesting seeing his more earlier takes on the character, and maybe if he was still trying to figure out what Superman was to them.
Yeah, Superman is a really interesting character here, isn't he, right? Because, like, that speech at the end, he just gives a big old speech. But the cause and effect, right? Like, I was thinking the same kind of thing earlier as I was finishing this up. I'm like, okay, so the mind control is necessary I think the Martians thought it was. It's necessary to actually take over the world and convince people to, like, trust them. But does the mind control take time to work? Like, they were setting up other watchtowers. Like, I guess that was to disseminate more of the mind control, but it just couldn't work all at once. So they had to, like, do a ruse, depending on how you like to say that word, where they, pretend to be superheroes, but they like the executions couldn't have waited too. Like that I know that 32% of our people were like, I'm for executions, but also that means that most people aren't. And that seems like an aggressive thing to do. So like, I don't know, like the choices. If I was a shape-shifting race, I would just do the scroll thing and go on the planet Earth and then set up my mind control stuff and then mind control the people. Like all the other stuff just doesn't, like it doesn't always line up. Like they're fun stories to play with and see them do their little battles with each other. But you could turn the people against the Justice League with, that apparently a flick of a switch. You don't need to do all this other stuff like, trying to make deserts into lush landforms, which again apparently is bad, Superman tells us, because humans will not do it on their own. They shouldn't have superpowered people to make the world better for too good for them, because then they won't become good on their own. And I'm like, okay, you guys like live on the moon and you're their superpowered protectors and you just don't want to feed them? Like, I don't understand. Like, you want to punch out mind-controlling squid boys, like Star Guys, Starros, that's fine. But if you help people to not freeze to death on the streets, that would be a bridge too far. So from knowing Morrison's career, they're very like big picture stuff and hope. And Morrison, like Alan Moore, is a sigil magician and uses the sigil, the imagery of comics, the stories of comics, to really try to create a better world and help people kind of turn to this greater sense of nobility within all of us. So I didn't feel like this is a maturation of Morrison's understanding of Superman. Superman just kind of feels like an ancillary character that Morrison's not really interested in yet. So I'm eager to read more. I had a thought as well about something else, but it'll come back to me later. Actually, this is the thought right here. I do love Morrison's love of Silver Age comics. And there's an interview, I think this might have been about All-Star Superman, but they were talking about one of their favorite comics as a kid in Scotland, coming across a Flash comic that's all green, and the Flash is just screaming on the cover. It's I'm green, 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 like just kind of this echoing and screaming that the world is green. And like as a wee boy, you just go, wow, I cannot wait to find out why the world is green. That flair for the dramatic, the oddities of that, really embracing Silver Age DC goofiness. So in this very kind of serious, taking itself serious comic, I just thought it was really incredible the way that they would interweave high concept sci-fi stuff and silliness with this storyline. And one example I have is wonderfully drawn space battle, right, of Kyle Rayner, Green Lantern, flying around this starscape. Cool green plasma flows over his skin, maintaining his temperature, siphoning off sweat, monitoring muscle tone, repelling micrometeorites. Love the alliteration. And then he thinks green thoughts. And I'm like, that is so goopy. It doesn't mean anything, but it's I don't know, it's just so beautiful. And it says, and his thoughts become things. Working the ring is like giving up cigarettes. He feels like a 60 a day man. I'm like, that feels so Scottish. Like, I don't know, just the way this pours out. I can almost like read it in Morrison's voice. And then suddenly it's all over. Green's silence. The plasma sends tiny alarm shocks through his nervous system. So a beautiful combination, right, of like a little bit of science, but mostly the fantasy fiction of the DC universe. And this is the kind of stuff that does make me happy about the differences between the tone with Marvel and DC. Like, they have a different tonality to them, at least they've had in the past. I know there's been a lot of kind of intersecting since. But when DC embraces the goofy, I really dig that. And so, I mean, this isn't our Marvel United podcast, but DC United is coming out, and we're all in on that. And who knows when it comes out, sometime in 2026, maybe. But, this Condiment King, that's good, right? You put Condiment King in a DC game, that makes me in. I'm in on that.
Yeah.
You try to do a Dr. What's his name? Is it Dr. Light? Where he... Yes. Was he the one who killed Sue Dibney?
He didn't kill Sue Dibney, but he raped her in the past.
That sounds awful. So that kind of like really over-the-top darkness stuff. Morrison also is kind of poking at a little bit here. I don't know if that's the exact story, but there's the Sue Dibney story is mentioned, right? About putting someone, the old days, I think is it one of the Martians that says, "Oh, why can't it be like the old days when we would fight? Superheroes would fight." I was trying to find the line. Something goofy, rather than killing girlfriends and putting them in refrigerators.
Oh, well, okay. So, yes. Well, the woman in the refrigerator was a few years before this, but Sue Disney wasn't for another 8 years.
So there was a woman who was killed that way in comics before Sue.
Yeah, sorry. Okay. So Sue was not killed in a refrigerator. That was only ever one person. That was Alex DeWitt, I think the name was, and she was Kyle Rayner's girlfriend.
Okay, that's the name. Because I remember that comic. I remember looking through Hall's, not an omnibus. So I think it has a different name, but it's a very big book, very big
compendium.
Compendium, and his Green Lantern comics. I remember seeing that. I also remember seeing that image in Wizard magazine. I didn't remember the name of the character. So that's what Graham's referring to, right? This kind of, right? Like, why can't we go back to maybe a bit more escapism rather than this kind of turn to the sinister and the overly dark? And I was really happy to see that. And the goofier it gets, the more I enjoy this. Like the green T-Rex that Kyle generates to attack the bad guys. That's fun. Yeah,
absolutely.
Sorry, just to bring it back together though, the Superman thing. So that feeling of like there's no Silver Age kind of goofy Superman here, except for maybe at the very end when he gives the speech. I think you get more of that appreciation in All-Star Superman, which is, I guess, again, a maturation of Morrison's, I suppose, take on Superman, and that just wasn't here, and that's fine. And that's how I connected the two. But sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, the book doesn't have a lot of internal thought boxes themselves. Like, most of it's kind of like third person, but you do have, a little bit into Superman's mind when he's like realizes, oh wait, why hasn't the kryptonite killed me yet? Like, I like that kind of that moment, because he is smart when he wants to be, but like obviously if he thinks he's being affected by kryptonite, makes sense he's not immediately making those connections, and then thinking, oh wait, these other people with fire powers have been sick, taken out of the equation. Like, wait a minute, this means something. So I like that he comes to this as well. He's obviously way late to the party compared to Batman, but I do like that he kind of gets there as well. And again, as you said, like, he could have just kind of finished it with his heat vision. I appreciate that obviously they didn't, because, that's not what they do with Superman. I did like a lot of the stuff with Batman, as you mentioned. Like, he feels, as much as he's part of the team, he's still kind of apart from the team because he's just a loner in general. Again, with a huge family, but when he's on the JLA, like, he's with them, but he's not necessarily friends with them. And so they're always kind of off-put by him by a little bit, because he is something different and does hold himself so different to the rest of them. And I like that was channeled through here very well. And again, Morrison eventually would have quite a long run on Batman, and also did a lot of Superman. So it's interesting to kind of see them get involved with these characters in a very early stage, and you can start to see elements of what they'll do later. More so, I think, with Batman than with Superman, as you mentioned, that the Superman here feels less like the Superman we get later in different interpretations, whether it be New 52 or Old Star Superman, whereas this does feel like their Batman.
Yeah. The art on Batman, just, I know I mentioned it earlier, but like all throughout the book, it just feels like Porter really loves this character. And the what's the word I'm looking for? The restraint as well that Morrison has to have to kind of not let Superman and Batman be too big in the book. It's impressive. It makes me want more and makes me want to read more. And that's not usually the case when I feel like the character, I'm not Morrison of this, but the stories feel like they're at the behest of the story. Like the characters are chasing the plot, and the writer isn't interested in talking about or really getting into the characters or mentioning them to a significant degree, because we've got to get to the end. And this is just, for the most part, except for Diana, I think there's maybe Aquaman, there's just enough breadcrumbs where, like, I would like to learn more about that. I want to see Batman in other situations now. I want to see how he's going to operate against different threats or bounce off the different members of the team. I want to see how the more confident Barry keeps butting heads against the newbie Green Lantern, like, Namor and Hulk or something, if you're reading a Defenders comic. I haven't, to my great shame, read a lot of blue lightning, blue energy Superman. So I'd be fun to read more Triangle era books if I can get my hands on some collections, because post Death and Return of Superman stuff, of course, Ron Friend's connection, friend of the show. But I would love to. We don't have to do another episode on this, but like, if there are other stories, I'm going to read ahead. I want to read more of this. I'm in. And even if we don't do more episodes on this, like, I think there's just enough of these exciting threads that I want to get more of these characters.
It's interesting because a lot about, especially when JLA launched, it felt like it was more about plot. It was going to have some character, but it was more plot first. And that was kind of a reversal, because when you had the Justice League get launched in the mid to late 80s after Legends and Crisis and Infinite Earths, it was less plot and more character. And you had DeMatteis, Giffen, really riffing on that. And I think actually you would enjoy it, but for very different reasons. And that was kind of more an eclectic team of weirdos, but it was more almost Avengers-like in terms of like, well, we have a lot of weird characters on the team. How do they interact with each other? So it was a lot more about the inter-character dynamics, whereas here it's less focused on that, cares less about it. It's more, they are the Titans. Let's see how let's see how the gods, make war, or whatever the case might be, how they ensure. So I'm very curious. I almost want you to read the old school Justice League at the same time as you're reading this JLA, to see how you feel about the tonal differences between them, because they are so different. And again, very different focuses, sometimes similar characters. I'd be curious how you would feel about it as it went on. Maybe you would prefer the more plot heavy book to the character-centric book, but it would be an interesting case study nonetheless.
I'm sure I feel like I would get whiplash almost, right, doing that.
A lot. I think artistically you would get the most whiplash, not because either one is badly drawn, but they're so different from each other, and they're only, 10 years apart or so, but you would feel like it was more like 20. Like, there's just such a stylistic difference, and again, one is more modern looking, starts to bleed into more modern coloring techniques, the other one is more old school 4-color process, very, kind of old school feel. Next time I see you, I'm just going to put the book in your hands and say, you don't have to take it. I just want to flip through and see how different this feels and see if it entices you at all. And you might say, nope, no thanks. But I'd be interested to at least get your take on it.
I mean, I love Justice League Unlimited and JLA. I played with Justice League characters as a kid. I'm now picking up the JLA books. There's only two, I think, out. There's only two out right now. I think I've pre-ordered the third one. And you're going to hand me another Justice League book. Are you going to make me a Justice League fan? Is that what's going to happen?
I mean, I think it's not hard.
Fair enough.
I mean, they're the biggest and the best for the most part. There's Justice League Detroit, that kind of stuff, which maybe isn't as good, but in terms of the character selections, not the actual quality of the writing, I think I can make you a Justice League fan. I keep thinking that at some point I'm going to make myself a Legion fan. It hasn't happened. But I keep thinking, like, if it was ever going to happen, I liked one run in the Legion in particular. There was one of the reboots that they did. It was Mark Waid and Barry Kitson, and I love that book. They weren't on it long enough, and then it became a Tony Bedard book, and Supergirl was there. It was different. But I think that was the closest I got to being a Legion fan. I just think there's too many characters for me to really sink my teeth into the Legion. I asked Zach, I'm like, because I thought this would be my moment. I'm like, Zach, they have this DC Finest collection. It's a good price. It's got the Legion of Superheroes. Any interest? He's like, no. I'm like, okay, but like, it's supposed to be for kids, like he's getting into Superboy and 50s Superboy, Superman family stuff from the early 60s. So I was like, oh man, this is late 60s. I think he'd really vibe with this. And he just did not seem to care. I still think if I handed it to him, he probably would read it, but he did not seem to have any particular interest. I'm going to go back in time for a moment just to I usually do this at first, but I was neglectful. This book started in November 96. So that's, it's almost been, next year will be 30 years since this version of the JLA launched. It was November when you had issue 1. So just to let you know other things that were happening on the newsstands that particular month, we had a one-shot that I remember buying, which was called 101 Ways to End the Clone Saga, which was a comedy book. And I really enjoyed it. You had, let's see, what else would it be of particular interest to you? Well, Aquaman was still in the middle of this kind of grunge phase. So again, that had been started by Peter David. This particular month is the first post-Clone Saga month that the Spider books had actually had in terms of the main narrative. And it was the first issue I started buying on a regular basis of Amazing Spider-Man. So Amazing Spider-Man 419 was my first real issue. I think we're at, 975 now? So I have not missed an issue since that issue, 419, which would have been, I guess I was 13 years old. Other particular books, the Heroes Reborn was right in the middle of its run, so you had the third issue of each of those books. The only one I actually bought at the time was Iron Man. I was such a huge fan of that version of Iron Man, so that was a lot of fun. Any particular love of Heroes Reborn?
I mean, yeah. We didn't know each other, but we were reading it together in a way, right? Mm-hmm. It's like if you both look at the moon at the same time as someone else, you're kind of together for a moment. So if we look at the same comic book as someone else in the same time, same era, aren't you joined by the Crimson Bands of Setarak or Crimson? The alliteration apparently is not Setarak. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Yeah, I love Heroes Reborn. And Heroes Return, I was pretty much all in. I think I was picking up all of the Heroes Reborn comics, and Heroes Return, I wasn't as consistent with Avengers, but everything else, yeah, especially Iron Man and Cap, those were really big for me. And then Fantastic Four for Jim Lee for Heroes Reborn was pretty big, just mostly because of the art, and when he left, I left too. So, big love for that stuff.
For sure. Also, this particular month, you had DC and Marvel All Access issues number 2 and 3, which was obviously, of interest, although it was not as good as the original DC and Marvel. They had the very first Deadpool ongoing launched in this particular, and by Joe Kelly launched at the same time as this, which is kind of
issue one is.
It's a crazy month if you think about it. Like those two books on the stand at the same time, I guess people wouldn't have expected or maybe thought of what would eventually become of Deadpool at that point. He had 2 miniseries, now he gets an ongoing, so that started this month. Heroes Reborn wise, I forgot, I did have Fantastic Four issue 3, which was a Namor issue, and I think Cap was in it as well, so that was another issue that came out that particular month. Let's see, at the end, the X Office, we had X-Men 96, number 1, which is the annual for X-Men. We had XSE was a miniseries at this time. X-Men was in its kind of weird post-Onslaught, kind of having a real direction phase. So there's like maybe 8 or 9 issues between the end of Onslaught and the beginning of Operation Zero Tolerance. And the book didn't really know what it was at that point. There was like a quick 2-parter with, I think, Storm, and I think it was like Kandra or something, one of those types of characters. So that was one of those issues. X-Factor 130, which I believe finally showed the assassination of Graydon Creed, but we didn't actually see who did it. That would not be resolved for many years. Do you know which...
I love that you said finally.
Yeah, well, because we knew it was going to happen. Do you know which book the true identity of the killer of Graydon Creed was eventually revealed in?
I don't have memory of having read it, so no, I don't.
It was like 3, maybe 4 years later in X-Men Forever, a book that no one remembers by Fabian Nicieza.
I have not read it.
You're forgiven. It's not maybe the best, but that came out. I'm trying to think. There was Untold Tales of Spider-Man issue 17. The Uncanny X-Men issue from this particular month is one that you will definitely remember the cover of, with Iceman holding his dad in his hands.
Yeah.
So that was a big one. So that's what was on the stands when JLA launched. And just to, again, reorient you for a moment, the top 5 movies for that month. Number 5, The Mirror Has Two Faces. Number 4, Romeo plus Juliet. Number 3, Star Trek First Contact. Love that movie. Number 2, Space Jam. And number 1, Ransom, which I don't think I ever saw when it came out, but I saw it later on.
I think we bonded. Didn't we bond? What conversation was it when we had met? It was almost like the first time we had met or something, and we're talking about comics, and we're like, Uncanny X-Men 340. Like, I remember very early on, what an odd cover to have bonded over, but like, I don't know, just the colors and the Joe Mad kind of chunkiness of it and how memorable it was. And it was quite a moment, like, texting each other back and forth on names of issues and numbers of issues and how many we have read and how faithful we are to following lines. And you were like, oh, seeing someone who's like me. Weird kind of like nerd testing moments where is it safe? Is it safe to open up to them? That's inside of me.
I mean, you and I, yes, because we knew him a lot of the same, like, as you said, like covers, issues, very specific details. And like up until that point, like, you know, I had a few friends who knew about comics, but they didn't know like individual issues. They didn't know specifics in the same way. Like even like as much as I love Paul, he doesn't know a lot of the exact specifics that we do. You know, we'll force him to read stuff, but like he knows a lot. But so I remember being hesitant when I found out I was going to meet Paul for the first time, because all I heard was, oh, by the way, my wife's husband likes comics. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. That can mean anything.
Yeah.
You like some...
He likes stand-up comedians.
Yeah, he could like comic book movies. Like, what does that mean? Just like, you know, the idea of like... Because whenever someone says they know about comics, I'm always like a little guarded inside. I'm like, well, how much do I want to like be like, oh, you know all this stuff, and then be disappointed or make that person feel disappointed? So I'm always kind of like in reserve, like, okay, well, like, show me what you know. I'm not going to test you, but I don't want to like put us both in an awkward spot where like I've come on too strong. And it's like dating, I guess. Like when you meet another comic book fan, you're like, well, how much can I let my freak flag fly here? How much can I let you know that I know? So I remember being very...
Just walk up and say, Richard Starkings, and you wait for them to respond, and if they don't get it, they don't get it, right?
Yeah. So I remember being very nervous about it. Although it's interesting, I don't remember being worried about that at all when I met you and everyone else at HeroClix, but I guess it's because we were already playing a miniature nerd game about comic book characters. So it was already implied that we would all have some sort of passing familiarity, whereas just meeting someone at a social function and being told they like comics feels more risk and reward. Like you know, more could happen here, whereas you feel like you're already in a safe space if you're playing like a nerd. Like you don't just come to a nerd game about characters without already knowing those characters generally.
Yeah, I love it. So I love that. I love that this week, we have done not only a flashback to 1996, but really kind of a deep dive into the ethos of the emergence of like future relationships that would evolve because of a love and appreciation for comics from this time. And you know what? It actually makes me love this comic more that I know that's exactly where it's situated. So I don't know if I think I would have bounced off of this in that era. But maybe the art would have kept me. I don't know. I would love to know what like little Nathan would have thought of this, whether he would have been into it. But
like I know for me, like I had early experiences with Reign of Superman was a big one for me when I was that summer buying some of those issues, not having many, and just being excited by the ones I read. But I never really picked up DC after that. In '98, I had a brief flirtation at a magazine store. I would pick up a few of Batman comics during Cataclysm that I kind of liked, but I never really followed it forward from there. When I was buying comics at the comic shop, I was for the most part kind of just a Marvel zombie. It wasn't till I was in university and the room adjoining mine. So I didn't have a roommate, but I did have someone on the other side of an adjoining room, and that person is funny. His name is Ben Riley. Which is very funny, and he was big into DC, and I'm like, I've never really read DC. It's because of him I read Watchmen for the first time, read a lot of Batman comics for the first time, like Batman Year One. Hadn't read a lot of that stuff. I'd read like Nightfall, but I hadn't really read the classics, so to speak, and the next 5 years were really spent doing deep dives into these characters. It also did kind of happen at the same time as, you know, I can look back and be like, well, we wouldn't do that maybe that now, but it was the advent of people, you know, scanning all their comics and putting them online, and old comics, I mean, not even new ones, and into torrents. And suddenly you could read like 400 issues of Batman or like 400 issues of Flash or whatever the case might be. And you could go back to the beginning because, you know, there weren't comprehensive reprint programs like they are now. You could easily go back and read, I want to read Uncanny X-Men right from the beginning. I could do that now. So I remember that being in and around that period. So I was able to absorb so much Marvel and DC because suddenly it was so much more available. Nowadays I can do it legit because I have Marvel Unlimited and I have DC Infinite. But back then there just wasn't that option. And I remember you used to make fun of me for this because the way I would reconcile this for myself was that it's not available in print. The only way it's available in print is to track down overly priced issues of which the company's not making money. Therefore, I'm not hurting the company by getting this torrent. And you were like, okay, whatever you want to tell yourself, kid. And I'm like, well, that is what I want to tell myself. But now, there are paid mechanisms to access these things. And so I avail myself of these mechanisms. So now that they're available, Nate, I did make do on my promise all those years ago that eventually I would pay for the content.
Wild, fantastic, fascinating. And this is like the same era, too, of like, songs being streamed and being downloaded. And also, maybe slightly before this is the emulation era where people are like, I can download every Nintendo game that ever existed and I can play them all. So what a kind of wild, the headlong rush into digital before these companies were ready to truly monetize them, of just like any comic you want to read or any song you want to listen to. So we've come so far, haven't we? And there's still so many comics and so many songs that are not legally able to get access to because of video games too. Legal mumbo jumbo. But interesting era. What a wild era.
I'm sure there's a lot of comics.
The Spider Clone.
There's probably a lot of comics that I've read that I have not been able to fully appreciate them or enjoy them because it was a shitty scan. Like now we get high-res scans of everything, right? Like it doesn't matter what it is. For a lot of these companies, once they're on their platform, they look nice. Whereas someone who scanned it in like 2002, it did not look great. But
no, I imagine
they were scanning original issues. Like they weren't getting these from files, or they were just someone had their collection and they were just scanning all their comics because they're like, you can do this now. Now we have easy scanners. We can start to do this. We can start to compile these images and make it so that other people can enjoy these comics, which seems so wild now because now every company has figured out a way to monetize it. There's different, as I've said before, I like the guided view, and it changes the way you even interact with the comics can be different. If you want to change up how you even appreciate the books, it's very interesting. But yeah, those were the days. Like we've been around long enough that we kind of remember that initial kind of push into digital. As you said, when companies were not ready to do that yet.
Yeah. Wow. This is probably your most thorough flashback of all the podcasts.
Probably, yeah. One of them. Yeah. It's interesting the things it was so different back then. And, that early days of the internet. Like, I wrote comic reviews for like 6 years. I forget I did that. I wrote like 20 reviews a week, but they're all gone because that website eventually moved hosts. And so it's all like in the ether. If it wasn't for the fact that if you look back and you can find old press releases, you'll find my name in many of them because there'll be like a book that I was really big on and they would put out a press release for that book. And so like, oh, well, Adam Chapman's listed there. Or there's books where, I'm on the desk jacket or the blurb. And I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot I did that. Like I've been podcasting so long, but it's so different that I forgot that I used to actually write.
Yeah. Who knows what the next 20 years has in store, right? Maybe you'll be in a watchtower on the moon.
I hope so.
Not podcast, some sort of, hologram, Adam hologram. Or you might be chained to the moon, Nick Fury style, becoming our true watcher, right? With the big space gun.
Now, I guess the better question is, 20 years from now, will we be done recapping the Clone Saga?
I hope not. I hope we can start again, right? We'll just kind of bring it back around again. We should do it every few years. We should just do the whole Clone Saga.
It's already the Clone Saga. The Clone Saga itself is already 30 years old, so that's horrific to think about.
I am really happy though, like for all that I love about like many pages or pieces of art from that storyline, and we've talked about this a lot. But it can blog, but because I'm in it with boys, the Spider Boys, it pushes me to do stuff that I wouldn't do ordinarily. I don't want to have these things just sitting on my shelf and not having read them all. So. Great project for me. Happy to jump back in whenever we're ready again. And we're just keeping the listeners excited. They can't wait. They're on the edge of their seats, if that's what they're doing when they listen to podcasts, for the next Clone Saga. So, but they're least expecting it. They're going to get thwipped.
That's right. They're going to get thwipped. That is great. I should end shows like that. Get thwipped.
It sounds perfectly, it doesn't sound weird at all.
No, not at all. Well, thank you so much for joining me for another Book of the Month Club, and thank you, listeners, for joining us again. You can email us at comicshenanigans@gmail.com, rate the show on Apple Podcasts, listen to us on Apple Podcasts, and also listen to us on Spotify. The next couple of weeks, we have Ron Friends coming back on the show to continue to talk about his Thor run with Tom DeFalco. We get into, I guess, the second or third years. We'll talk about the New Warriors on there, hopefully. I actually haven't had that conversation yet, but I'm assuming that we will discuss it at length. Upcoming episodes also include Chuck Austin's back on the show to talk about Superman Metropolis, which is the book he wrote in the early to mid-2000s, which I did not know was not meant to be a maxi-series, was meant to be an ongoing that kind of got shuttered into a maxi-series format. It was all about Jimmy Olsen at that time, and a very interesting existential take on technology, oneself, one's drive and ambition, and who oneself is. So that was a very interesting conversation with Chuck. And we're going to have Connor McCurry back on the show in October to talk about an upcoming graphic novel that will be coming out actually the week after we drop the episode. So a lot of good stuff. And also we have another Creator Spotlight. Nate, did you actually check to see who the Creator Spotlight is on next month? I think
no, because I trust you implicitly.
Oh, because I think I said it, but I'll just spoil it here. We're going to be talking about 3 very different works by John Byrne, all Marvel-centric. So I'm very
exciting. I can't wait. Love John.
Yeah, I think it'll be fun. It'll be interesting to kind of arc out his career a little bit with 3 random books, but I think we'll have a good time. So, anyways, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you next time. Oh, Nate, yeah?
Keep thinking green thoughts.
And keep thwipping. Enjoy. Bye, guys.